May 1940. Hitler controls almost all of Europe. France is collapsing. Belgium has fallen. In the British cabinet, some ministers are quietly suggesting the unthinkable: to negotiate with Hitler, make peace, and survive. One man says no. He is a 65-year-old man who has been Prime Minister for exactly one day. The men in that room want to live, but Churchill stands up and says something they will never forget.
If this Long Island story of ours is to end at last, let it end only when each one of us lies choking in his own blood upon the ground.
He will lead Britain through its darkest hour. He will refuse to surrender when surrender seems rational. He will save Western civilization. And then his own people will vote him out. This is his story. November 30th, 1874. Blenheim Palace, Oxfordshire. A boy is born prematurely. His name, Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, is a rising conservative politician. His mother, Jenny Jerome, is a wealthy American socialite. You would think Winston's childhood would be comfortable, but it was not. His parents barely notice him. Lord Randolph is obsessed with his political career. Jenny is obsessed with London society. Winston sees his mother perhaps once a day, for a few minutes. The only person who loves Winston is his nanny, Mrs. Everest. She feeds him, reads to him, and comforts him when he is sick. Decades later, Winston will write that she was his dearest and most intimate friend during childhood. This abandonment shapes him for life. At age 7, Winston is sent to St. George's School. It's elite, it's prestigious, it's brutal. The headmaster uses savage corporal punishment. Winston is beaten regularly for poor academic performance and rebellious behavior. After 2 years, Mrs. Everest notices whip marks on Winston's body. She tells his mother. Winston is immediately withdrawn from the school. At age 13, Winston enters Harrow School. He fails the entrance exam so badly that he hands in a nearly blank Latin paper. He is placed in the lowest form. But he excels at 2 things: English composition and military tactics. Throughout all of this, Winston desperately seeks his father's approval. But Lord Randolph's letters are cold and dismissive. In one letter, his father calls Winston a social wastrel, destined for a shabby, unhappy, and futile existence. January 24th, 1895. Lord Randolph dies at age 45. Winston is 20. He writes that he never truly knew his father. Winston will spend the rest of his life trying to vindicate his father's name and prove him wrong about his son. Winston graduates from Sandhurst Military Academy. He is commissioned as a cavalry officer, but Britain is at peace. There is no war to fight. So he uses family connections to travel to Cuba, where Spain is fighting rebels. He goes as both an officer observer and a war correspondent. On his 21st birthday, Winston is shot at for the first time. He loves it. This trip gives him 2 lifelong habits: Cuban cigars and afternoon naps. In 1897, Winston's regiment is posted to India. He finds it boring. Then he hears about a military expedition on the northwest frontier, where Pashtun tribes have rebelled. Winston immediately requests leave. He uses his mother's connections to get attached to the force, as both officer and war correspondent. The Malakand campaign is brutal. Winston fights in several fierce battles, deliberately exposing himself to enemy fire. He writes a book about the campaign. It becomes a bestseller. At 23, Winston is both a war hero and a successful author. In the year 1898, Winston maneuvers his way into another war, the British expedition to Sudan. The climactic moment was the Battle of Omdurman. 400 British cavalry charge into what they think is a small enemy force. It is actually several thousand Sudanese warriors hidden in a depression. His shoulder is injured, he has no sword, so he draws his pistol instead. The charge lasts 2 minutes. 21 British soldiers do not survive it. But British Maxim machine guns mow down 11,000 Sudanese warriors. Winston is horrified by the scale of death, even as he writes vividly about his own heroism. In the year 1899, the Second Boer War breaks out in South Africa. Winston goes as a war correspondent at an extraordinary salary of £250 per month, making him one of the highest-paid journalists in the world. November 15th, 1899. Winston is aboard an armoured train on reconnaissance when Boer forces ambush it. The train is derailed. Winston, though technically a civilian correspondent, takes charge. He organises the soldiers, directs the clearing of the tracks, and helps wounded men escape.
Get those men out! We need to clear this track immediately! Move! Move! Move!
But Winston is captured. A pistol is found in his pocket. Under the laws of war, carrying a weapon while claiming to be a journalist could get him executed as a spy. The Boers decide to hold him as a prisoner of war instead. He is imprisoned in Pretoria and immediately begins planning escape. December 12th, 1899. Winston climbs over the prison wall during a moment when guards are not looking. 2 other prisoners who were supposed to escape with him cannot get over. Winston proceeds alone. He has no map, almost no money, speaks no Afrikaans. He is in enemy territory, hundreds of miles from British forces. He jumps on a freight train heading east. Lost and desperate, he eventually knocks on a random door. By extraordinary luck, the door belongs to John Howard, one of the very few British citizens in that area. Howard hides Winston at the bottom of a coal mine for days, living among rats and coal dust. Eventually, Howard smuggles Winston out, hidden in wool bales on a train to Portuguese East Africa. Winston spends days cramped in the wool, barely able to breathe. December 23rd, 1899, he reaches safety. The escape makes Winston an international celebrity overnight. The Boers distribute wanted posters. Englishman, 25 years old, walks with a slight stoop, speaks through his nose, cannot pronounce the letter S. He rejoins the army, fights in more campaigns, returns to England as a national hero. October 1900, he runs for Parliament. He wins. At 25, Winston Churchill enters politics. 1904. Winston switches from the Conservative Party to the Liberal Party over the issue of free trade. Conservatives see this as betrayal. They jeer as he crosses the floor of Parliament. But the Liberals reward him. 1908, Cabinet Minister at age 33. 1911, First Lord of the Admiralty, the civilian head of the entire Royal Navy. This is Winston's dream job. He learns every detail of naval technology. He visits every major base. He even learns to fly, until his wife begs him to stop after several close calls. Winston correctly predicts war is coming with Germany. He converts the fleet from coal to oil. He builds bigger battleships. He mobilizes the Navy before war is declared. August 1914, World War I begins. Thanks to Winston, the Royal Navy is ready. But Winston makes a catastrophic mistake. He convinces the military to attack the Dardanelles, a narrow strip of water in Turkey connecting 2 seas. His plan is to send the Navy through, reach the Ottoman capital, and knock Turkey out of the war in one move. On paper, it looks brilliant. In the war room, the generals are not so sure. But Winston is persuasive. The plan is approved. And that decision will cost thousands of lives. The naval attack fails. Ships are sunk. Then troops land on the Gallipoli Peninsula, but cannot advance. It becomes trench warfare with worse conditions. thousands die. Winston is blamed. May 1915. He is removed from the Admiralty and demoted to a ceremonial position with no power. At 40, he believes his career is over. November 1915. Winston resigns from the government entirely. He volunteers for military service on the Western Front. He spends 6 months commanding troops in the trenches under fire. 1917. Prime Minister David Lloyd George brings Winston back into government. Winston manages weapons production. He is brilliant at it. After the war, Winston holds several senior government positions. He is busy, powerful, and confident. In 1925, he ties the British currency to a fixed amount of gold. It sounds stable, but it is not. British goods become too expensive for other countries to buy. Factories slow down. Workers lose their jobs. 1926. Workers across the country go on strike. Winston takes a hard line against them. The public turns on him. The man who was once celebrated is now deeply unpopular. His own party grows tired of him. 1929. Conservatives lose the election. Winston enters his wilderness years, out of government, politically isolated, writing books to pay his bills. 1933. Adolf Hitler comes to power in Germany. Winston immediately recognizes the threat. He warns Parliament that Germany is rearming, building an air force, and planning conquest. He is ridiculed as a warmonger, an alarmist.
We stand at the precipice of a great disaster, yet you laugh. This nation faces its gravest hour, and still you refuse to act.
The British government pursues appeasement, making concessions to Hitler to avoid war. 1938. Prime Minister Chamberlain agrees to let Hitler take part of Czechoslovakia in exchange for peace. Chamberlain returns to Britain claiming victory. Winston condemns the agreement, saying, "We have sustained a total and unmitigated defeat." 6 months later, Hitler breaks his promise and seizes the rest of Czechoslovakia. Winston was right. September 1st, 1939. Germany invades Poland. Britain declares war. Prime Minister Chamberlain brings Winston back as First Lord of the Admiralty. A signal goes to all Royal Navy ships. Winston is back. April 1940. A British military operation in Norway fails disastrously. Chamberlain's government collapses. May 10th, 1940. The same day Germany invades France, Winston Churchill becomes Prime Minister. He is 65 years old. That night, Winston writes, "I felt as if I were walking with destiny, and that all my past life had been but a preparation for this hour." May 13th. Winston addresses Parliament for the first time as Prime Minister. He says, "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. You ask what is our aim? I can answer in one word: victory." Within weeks, France is collapsing. The British army is trapped on the beaches at Dunkirk. Some in Winston's cabinet suggest negotiating with Hitler. Britain is alone. France is falling. It seems hopeless. Winston refuses absolutely. He tells his cabinet, "If this Long Island story of ours is to end at last, let it end only when each one of us lies choking in his own blood upon the ground." The Dunkirk evacuation succeeds. Over 338,000 soldiers are rescued, carried across the Channel by Royal Navy ships and hundreds of civilian boats. France surrenders on June 22, 1940. Britain stands alone against Nazi-controlled Europe. June 4th. Winston gives one of history's most famous speeches. "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." Summer, 1940. The skies over England become a battlefield. A small group of RAF pilots, outnumbered and exhausted, are the only thing standing between Britain and a German invasion. He follows every move of the battle, every loss, every close call. On August 20th, he finds the words that will outlive everything else he ever said. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. By September, the Luftwaffe has lost the battle. The German invasion of Britain is postponed indefinitely. But Hitler switches to terror bombing of British cities. The Blitz begins. For months, German bombers attack London and other cities night after night. 43,000 civilians are killed, over 1 million homes destroyed. While London burns, Winston walks through it. He shows up in the rubble, among the people who have lost everything. And somehow, just seeing him there makes people feel like they can keep going. December 7th, 1941. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. America enters the war. Winston immediately knows the war is now winnable. But 1942 brings disasters. Singapore falls. The worst disaster in British history, Winston calls it. North Africa is failing. German submarines are strangling Britain's supply lines. July 1942. There is a vote of no confidence in Winston's leadership. Winston stands up and fights for his own survival. When the votes are counted, he wins 475 to 25. Late 1942. The tide turns. British forces defeat the Germans at El Alamein in Egypt. Winston says, "This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning." 1943 to 1944. The Allies advance in North Africa and Italy. The Soviet Union pushes from the east. Plans begin for D-Day, the invasion of France. 1944. D-Day. The largest amphibious invasion in history. Winston desperately wants to watch from a warship. King George VI convinces him it is too dangerous. Winston spends D-Day in London, anxiously monitoring reports. The invasion succeeds. By 1945, Germany is being crushed from both sides. May 7th. Germany surrenders unconditionally. May 8th. VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. Winston addresses the nation. Crowds fill the streets of London in celebration. July 1945. With victory in Europe secured, Britain holds a general election. Winston expects to win easily. The result shocks the world. Labour wins in a landslide. Winston is voted out. The British people wanted social reform, a national health service, expanded welfare. They associated conservatives with the poverty of the 1930s. Winston was the perfect wartime leader, but they did not want him for peacetime. Winston is devastated. His wife tells him the defeat might be a blessing in disguise. Winston replies, "At the moment it seems quite effectively disguised." 1946. Winston travels to America. He gives a speech at Fulton, Missouri. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. This phrase defines the Cold War. Once again, Winston warns of a threat others do not yet fully see. Once again, he is right. 1951. Winston returns as Prime Minister at age 76, but he is too old. He falls asleep in meetings, suffers a stroke in 1953. April 1955. He finally resigns. His final years are spent at Chartwell, painting, writing, entertaining old friends. His mind gradually fades. On November 30th, 1964, he celebrates his 90th birthday. January 15th, 1965, a severe stroke. He lingers for 9 days. January 24th, 1965, Winston Churchill dies. The same date his father died, exactly 70 years earlier. January 30th. Winston is given a state funeral, the largest in history. Representatives from 112 nations attend. Hundreds of thousands line the streets in silence. His coffin is carried by boat up the River Thames, then by train to Bladon, Oxfordshire. He is buried near Blenheim Palace, where he was born. The grave is simple, a plain stone. Winston Churchill lived 90 years. He spent 40 of them seeking his father's approval, even after his father was dead. He failed spectacularly. He was rejected. He was written off. Most men at 65 are thinking about retirement. He was thinking about how to save a continent. Everyone around him said to negotiate, but he said no. Was he naive about the cost? Did he not understand the odds? Or did he feel that some fights cannot be negotiated, that some evils must be opposed, even if opposition seems hopeless? Winston was not a saint. He held racist imperial views that were reprehensible even by his own era's standards. His government's policies contributed to the Bengal famine that killed millions. He authorized strategic bombing that killed hundreds of thousands of German civilians. But he saved Western civilization. Without Winston, Britain would likely have negotiated with Hitler in 1940. France had fallen and America was neutral. The Soviet Union was allied with Germany, so negotiation was the rational choice. Winston, however, chose the irrational path, to fight alone against impossible odds. And he won. What made him do it? The neglected child seeking approval? The failure trying to redeem himself? The outcast proving everyone wrong? The man who spent his entire life preparing for one moment. Winston once said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." He failed. He was rejected. He was written off. And then he saved the world. Because when it mattered most, Winston Churchill refused to surrender. Next on History Library. He wrote the words that founded a nation. He doubled the size of America with a single deal. He was a genius, a visionary, and one of history's greatest contradictions. But the man who wrote that all men are created equal owned over 600 enslaved people. That contradiction has never been resolved, and it still matters today.